Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Welcome to USA Prepares, everybody. This is Cathy, and I'm going to be doing a show with Sharon. Jason is engineering the program. Thank you, Jason. Sharon and I will be talking about what you need in your kitchen as far as kitchen appliances, the small kitchen appliances, some of our favorite things, and how we use them. I want to say that between both of us, we have 9 children, and I believe Sharon's probably been cooking as long as me. I've probably been cooking about 50 years. So I think that between both of us, we've made a lot of meals, so hopefully we can help others. Welcome, Sharon.
Well, good morning. Yeah, and, people can learn what they can bake in their house, and then also if you're happen to be cooking for food storage down the road with the prices. Yeah, we do have at least that many years, I would say. Yeah. So where did you want to start, Cathy?
Well, I want to say there's so many things that I use in my kitchen, but I would say maybe I can get through, like my top things would be, and I would like to explain how I use them and what I use them for and how they save me money and time. And mine have evolved over the years. When I first started cooking, I didn't have many of these things. I've accumulated them over my lifetime. And what I found is if you can't afford it, get what level you can afford. But if you can afford to get a better one, it will probably last you your whole life. Like I had a very inexpensive blender at one point, and it did okay. But then I got a better one. I got a Cuisinart blender, and I definitely noticed the difference. And so, eventually if you can just accumulate these through whatever, saving or things like that. But some of my top ones, and then I'll ask you yours, but like my top 5 ones I would say I use all the time would be my food processor, my slow cooker, my KitchenAid, my blender, and I use my convection oven a lot. And there's so many. I use my food saver a lot, but I want to know what your favorites are, Sharon.
Well, honestly, I use my blender, but I use my mixer because I make a lot of food from scratch, and I really like my mixer. I have just, after all these years, I'm just really getting into using a food processor some. I don't really know why I hadn't done it too much, except that I just really didn't have one, and I didn't grow up with one, but they are a lifesaver, and I was really fascinated with all things that you can do, so it's challenged me to do more. But I do that, and then I actually like just my little pastry blender that I use for biscuits because I make biscuits and or pie crust and stuff. But those are the main 2 that I use a lot, especially my mixer, because I just wouldn't want to mix all that stuff by hand. It would be really hard. But I love my crock pot because you can put really inexpensive cuts of meat in it and just cook them slow all day with some seasonings, and you have delicious meat, and it doesn't cost a fortune. So actually I kind of pare down to that myself, is what I like. But I have all kinds of other kitchen stuff that I like to use. And, I'm kind of jumping track here. I really need my kettles. I use kettles, and I like to have a stock pot for making larger amounts. I think you have one too, right?
Oh, yeah, I have many. I've accumulated mine over the years. I have a 16-quart Revereware pot. I believe they probably still make them, but mine's really old, and I use that a lot of times for canning or if I'm making a big meal. sometimes if I'm having a bunch of people over, I'll buy 2 whole chickens, and I put that in the 16-quart stock pot, and I can fit both chickens in there and all the celery and onions and carrots that go with it. And I mean, I use smaller ones, but I probably have 3 in my kitchen because I'll make noodles in one, and then I'll make my other meal, whatever it might be, a stew or a soup. Or, a lot of times I'll make a pot of beans. Sometimes I make it on the stove. Sometimes I make it in the crock pot. But I find that if I only had one stock pot, I would probably be thinking about buying another one quickly.
Yeah, I actually have a couple big ones, too, because sometimes when you're making large amounts, it's so much easier to work with a great big pot. My personal liking is the Revereware kettleware, and I have a big stock pot that's Revereware, and then I have it's pretty big. It's not the biggest, and then I also have just another one that happens to have a copper bottom, and it works okay. But the Revereware is superior. But you want to get the older ones. The new ones have real thin copper now. But I find mine at garage sales, and if you ever see estate sales, you can find them. I have gotten most of my stuff, as I call it, previously enjoyed. Okay, so even my blenders and my crock pots for sure, and even my main mixer that I used, I got at a garage sale. The estate sales are particularly good when they mention it's estate sale because a lot of times it's older people that had quality stuff, but they're no longer here. And unfortunately, their offsprings don't realize the value of what they have, and they can sell them for a song. I mean, I bought a really nice, almost new-looking Revereware kettle for $1 at a garage sale with the lid because these kids didn't know what they had. So I take advantage of that, and I agree, if you get the better quality stuff, for sure, but a blender's better than no blender, and a crock pot, even if it's one of the cheap ones at Walmart, they had them for like $10 or something like that, they'll still work, And so you don't have to have a lot of money to invest to get into some of the stuff, but if you're going to start cooking your own meals and you save a ton of money by doing that and it actually tastes a lot better, then it really helps to have these essential tools to work with. I'm talking a little bit about crock pot, which I don't know how I jumped over there, but for 13 years we lived off grid, so I really couldn't use a crock pot very much except for the summer when we had extra power. And so I actually have a cast iron Dutch oven, and I used it in the same way that you would do a crock pot. And it worked particularly well in the winter because if you happen to have a wood stove, you can just put it on your wood stove and cook it slow all day long. And so it's also handy. They are not inexpensive, by the way. They're just not. But we got ours at a garage sale for probably $10 or $15. Amazing. And it had a lid. But you can actually use them if you ever were looking at having to cook off grid, like over a fire or flame or something. The Dutch oven holds up really well. But assuming we have power, which we probably will for a very long time, a crock pot can be a wonderful tool to help you do all kinds of stuff. Right now I'm making a bunch of apple butter. I have apples going soft. You just put them in there with sugar and the seasoning. They're cooking down, and it just makes a dream. And you just put them in jars and can them. It's really simple. And so I'm enjoying the ability to use my crock pot all the time now because we are on grid with the option of being off if we want. So I don't have to worry about how low the batteries might be getting. So anyway, kind of beating a beat thing. You and I can maybe discuss later on some of our favorite things we like to do in a crock pot too if you want. But yeah, and then you were talking about your blender, what you like. Did you want to go there or do you want to go somewhere else?
Sure. Well, I would say my food processor, I have a Cuisinart food processor, and clear back when I was first married, my husband bought me a Cuisinart, and I had that for years. And one of the problems that I had with it, I made 2 mistakes, so I'll mention those first. One time I was blending, I had a hot liquid, and I think it was like a tomato liquid, and it was a little too warm, and I wanted it to puree it a little bit more. And I put it in the bowl, and I caused hairline cracks in it because the bowls are a hard plastic. And that was my fault. So I eventually got a replacement bowl. And then eventually everything still worked on it, but what happened was you can't always get replacement parts for them when they're that old. It was probably over 30 years, and the handle started to crack because they fit in there tight on a Cuisinart base. So it started to crack, and so I ended up getting a new one. But that was my fault. And then the other thing that I did was it has like a pusher in it. You put the lid on, and when you put your food in, like if you're slicing, you can slice anywhere from 1 millimeter to 6. I have all 6 discs. And they also have like a julienne one if you wanted to julienne your softer vegetables like zucchini and cucumbers. They have a shredding. I have 2 shredding discs that go with them, so I can make like hash browns, anything shredded, coleslaw. So the other mistake that I made was I got my bowl too full when I was making a vegetable, and I didn't realize it. And when I pushed down, there was so much in there that I cracked it. So then I had to buy a replacement. But had I not done those 2 things, I probably would have still had the original one. But what I wanted to go ahead, Sharon.
No, I just say the older ones tend to last really well. So if you can round up an older one, you really will get your money's worth. Even though if you get a new one, it still works. But the old ones, I think, were made better, don't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I will put a warning in there. The blades are extremely sharp. So don't ever use a wash rag on them or dish rag. Use like one of the brushes because they are super sharp, but don't reach your hands in there. That blade that I had was so sharp, it never dulled. And I actually my son parted it out on eBay for me, so I made quite a bit of money back on it because I couldn't get the bowl, but other people wanted my part. So anyway, you can slice, and some of the things I slice, like if you're going to make a cucumber salad, you can do real thin. You can do like a 1 or 2 millimeter. I use it for au gratin or scalloped potatoes for slicing. If I'm making vegetable soup or chicken soup, any kind of soup where I'm using vegetables, you can take like a whole stalk of celery and take 2 or 3 of them and put them in the pusher, and you just push them down, and you can maybe go 1/2 inch if that's what you want, or 3/8. You just look at your blade, and it does it so fast. You can do all your carrots. You could do your zucchini if you're making like minestrone or you're adding that to your vegetable soup. If you want them to be chopped up real fine, I just take, like, say you have an onion. I take a onion and I quarter it, and then I put it in there, and I would just pulse it, because if you turn it on, you'll have a puree. So if you pulse it like 2 or 3 times, and then you can just visually see. And sometimes you have like 1 or 2 chunks, so then I open it up, move it around a little bit, and pulse it again, and it chops it so fast so that it saves your time in the kitchen. Because to me, I spend so much time in the kitchen that when I'm making big batches of things, I don't want to be chopping for a half hour. I can do in a food processor in 5 minutes what would probably take me 20 to 25 minutes. So when we get back, I wanted to talk some more uses of it and what I have found over the years, like refried beans and those types of things. So when we get back, we can continue on the food processor. Welcome back, everybody. I'm with Sharon, and I was talking about food processors, and it's probably one of my favorite appliances in the kitchen, and maybe later on in the show, I can do I made a list of my quick things that I could not live without, and there's probably about 15 or 20, and I'm not going to go into all those today, but I figured I would just let people know so that they think about it. If something like in the future, they could use it, or maybe ask for a wedding or shower gifts or housewarming gifts for someone. But I wanted to mention some of the things that you can do with the food processor. You can make like nut butters, and it's real easy if you have like your raw almonds or your raw peanuts and you want to make it. In a matter of minutes, you can use it for that. You can also like chop nuts in it. You can shred cheese, and in the book, they have a manual, and it tells you what blade to use and for like a soft cheese or a hard cheese. And some you really wouldn't want to, like your goat cheese, you wouldn't want to shred that because it's too soft. But they give you a guide in there. You can make baby food in there. I do have a recipe for pie dough, and I have used it, and it works really well. So I don't want to go into it right now, but maybe right after the break, I'll just break it down real quick and read it. And then I believe you can find it online, but my manual's older, so I'm not sure if it's the same. I haven't been able to find the same one online. So I'll just read it real quick with that. But, like, I have one example. My son was making salsa, and when he was living here last year with us, and he was cutting everything by hand. And I kept asking him, you sure you don't want to use the food processor? So I finally got it out, and I said, here, let's just put your onions in there and let me show you. Well, he would chop for an hour, getting everything chopped up real small. And then we did it in the food processor, and he was done with all the chopping in 5, maybe 6 minutes. So he got a food processor. But there's so many things that you can do. There's a dough blade on them, too, that you can use. So I just wanted to say with that, you can do like pesto, sauces, like a mayonnaise, and anything that you want to shred. So a lot of times it just takes a minute to go back and like look in the manual and get ideas. There's even recipes in the manual. So that's just some ideas for the food processor. And I will give the pie dough recipe when we come back. It's not real long, but it works well, and you can put it in the freezer too if you want to make it ahead of time. You can put it in the freezer. So you have any thoughts on that, Sharon?
Well, I think that by getting something like this, it takes the drudgery out of cooking, because some people don't like chopping. They don't find that enjoyable. And when you can make something so much quicker, then you're much more likely to cook from what you have on hand. And then you'll not only eat healthier, but you'll save a lot of money, which is always a useful thing. I think particularly with prices going up, you and I were discussing how much the prices have jumped already, that, a lot of people that are used to eating out may not be able to do that now. And so by getting some of these basic tools, it is not hard to make the food, and it tastes even better than when you buy it. And so, no, you have me very inspired about doing more things with my food processor, because like I said, I hadn't really known all the things you could do until you started telling me. I thought, well, that saved me a ton of time, which would be really nice. So, yeah, you've got me totally sold. I tell you. And I think,
well, Sharon,
simple tools make life easier. They just make it a lot easier. Uh-oh.
Well,
okay, sorry about the background.
And I use my food processor like when I'm dehydrating. Like I slice apples real thin, and I dehydrate those.
Uh-huh.
I do zucchini, and I dehydrate. So what's nice is everything is uniform. So especially if you're dehydrating, you don't want like one piece real big and one piece real little, because it's not going to dehydrate quickly. So it makes it uniform, and it just saves time. That's all I can say. Like my green peppers, I'll chop them up, put them in the freezer, and I lay them out on a flat cookie sheet or in a flat Ziploc bag. I can get a whole peck done in about 2 minutes. So when we come back, I'll give the pie recipe, and then I want Sharon's opinion on how she uses her KitchenAid and all her mixers. Be right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Sharon. I wanted to give the pastry recipe, and this one is different than the one I found online, but this is the one that I've used for a long time. So here it is. You take 1 stick of unsalted butter, chilled, and you cut it into tablespoon-sized pieces. Now, I have used the salted when I've forgotten to buy unsalted, so it still works. You have 1 large egg yolk, half a teaspoon of salt, 5 tablespoons of cold water, and it has to be cold. You could even put it in the refrigerator for a while and make sure it's ice cold. 1.5 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. And there again, sometimes I have used all-purpose if I haven't have the unbleached, and it did work. You just use your regular metal blade, the one that you chop with. It goes right inside the food processor. So you put your butter, egg yolks, salt, and water in the work bowl. Then you just pulse them for 5 or 6 times. Then you process that for 5 seconds. You just hold it down, the on button, for 5 seconds. You'll probably have small lumps of butter, and that's what you want. Then you add the flour and process just until the mixture forms a mass of dough. So you don't want to overprocess. You don't want it to be smooth like you were rolling out your pie dough. You're going to have little clumps of flour. So you take your blade out carefully, and then you take a rubber spatula and you get all the dough, and then you put it in a plastic food storage bag. And you just put it in there real gently. You don't want to handle pie dough too much. And then you just take your hand and you push it down into about a 6-inch disc. And you have to refrigerate that for at least 2 hours or overnight. Or you can freeze it. So it's really easy to make it in the morning if you're going to make your pie later, or just make it the day before. But literally, you can have a pie dough made in probably 4 or 5 minutes. And it makes a good-sized pie dough. You can at least get a 10-inch crust out of that. And you can also use it for like a pot pie or a tart or something else that if you want to use it for. And then all you do when you want to use it, once it's chilled, and I have a piece of old corian, and I put it in the freezer. And I get the corian out, and I just flour it a little bit, and then I roll it out. You don't want to handle pie dough too much, or you're going to have a mess. So you might have to start all over. But when you get it out, you just roll it out one time. I fold it in quarters. I gently put it in the pie pan. Then I unfold it, and then you can, put your edges on it. So that's the pie crust recipe. Now, the one online might be better, but Sharon, I don't know because I haven't tried that one.
Yeah, I've never tried it in a food processor. I might have to try that. I think it sounds really interesting. You were mentioning mixers, and I would, if I had to do without anything at this point, I wouldn't want to do without my mixer. But now that I'm learning all things I could do with my food processor, I might be joining you on that one. I actually have an old Sunbeam vintage Mixmaster, and you can find them online. Now, we got ours for $5 or $10 at a garage sale. You want to make sure you get the beaters with them because they're harder to come by. They're older, but they have a super heavy-duty motor, and you can mix like double and triple batches of cookie dough. They come with 2 mixing bowls a lot of times, but you don't really have to have mixing bowls. You can put any kind of bowl that can handle a beater. Like I have a lot of the old Tupperware mixing bowls, and you can use those. But I like them because they chop up everything. Like I can make a great big double or triple batch of oatmeal cookies and go ahead and put in like chocolate chips, and it still mixes it all in. It's that powerful. So I like it. I also do have, though, a KitchenAid. And I got the KitchenAid originally for Christmas because I decided I was going to make a really high-protein bread, and I used multiple grains. And so I could do it by hand, but it was going to need to mix longer because if you are working with whole grains that you've ground and you put liquid in, you let it set for a little bit, and it kind of absorbs some of the liquid, and then you can have more and finish up your bread, and it makes a moister, lighter bread. And so I was doing kind of a modified Atkins diet for about 3.5 years, and I made this multi-grain bread, so I'd make 5 loaves at a time, honestly, using my KitchenAid. And then I would freeze. Well, actually, I gave one to my sister-in-law, and then I would freeze 3 and eat one. And because I was the primary person eating it, it would last quite a bit. And so I decided that rather than make bread by hand or just the smaller loaves in the bread makers, which are really handy, that I could kind of tweak it a little better by making a large batch. And so I've used my KitchenAid for that. And occasionally when I'm making something really big, I use the KitchenAid too. I just have to keep my KitchenAid up in a cupboard kind of in my pantry, and it's pretty big and heavy, so I tend to use this other one instead, the Sunbeam. It's not that heavy, and I have it down lower. And then you were talking about a little hand mixer, and I actually have one of those, but I find that most of the time I just use a good whisk. If it's just a small amount, I just kind of go towards that. But I do like these Sunbeam Vintage Mix Masters. And I went online, and they run from $70 to $130. They're still available online. You just want, for sure, to make sure you have the beaters with it, because they're not as easy to find. But they're heavy-duty beaters, so unless you stick your spatula in the beater, which has happened before when I was young, they will last for almost anything. And then even I've had some beaters that were really, my mom had one of these things when I was a kid, and I just loved it. Okay, so I rounded them up. So they've been around a long time. But my husband has been able to spot weld the top because they're a heavy-duty metal, whatever they're made from. They sometimes will break loose at the top a little bit, and he's actually spot welded quite a few of them over the years. So if you have somebody who can do that, you can actually save the beaters, but they kind of get mangled if you actually get something in them, so you do have to be careful about that. But, these tools make it easy to put a meal together and add extra things. So like with this Kuzar thing, you have got me totally convinced. It's like I've only used it a little bit with my canning, but I thought, my goodness, I'm just not using this as much as I should. But instead, like you said, instead of spending an hour making something, you can do it in 5 or 6 minutes. Well, then you're much more likely to do it, and then you're much more likely to take advantage of the staples instead of already made. You can make
it takes the drudgery out of it. It really does. Yeah. If you've ever tried to mix a double batch of cookie dough by hand, it really is a lot of work. And when you use a KitchenAid or one of the older Sunbeam mixers, it just takes the work out of it. And what I like about the KitchenAid is it's on a stand. So you don't have to stand there, and you can let it, once you start stirring, it's got like a stir function at the very beginning. If you have it on the lowest, you can start mixing things in, and then let's say it's got to beat for 3 or 4 minutes, you can kind of watch it, but you can still be in the kitchen doing other things or getting more ingredients ready. And the one thing I wanted to mention, Sharon, before I forget, we have a KitchenAid that we got, and that we had one, and then my uncle died, and we got his. It was an older one, and it started to lose power. And so my husband put brushes in the KitchenAid. So don't throw it away if it starts to lose power. It might just be that it needs brushes. And you can buy those separately.
Yeah, my husband did that before on one of the other Sunbeam ones, the Mix Master that I use. Another thing I was going to tell you about making these big batches, I've made like banana bread or applesauce bread, and you can put it in a jar and can it that way. And so you can make great big batches, or you can just bake a bunch and then freeze some. And so, it allows you to make larger batches, and it saves you time down the road. So if you don't, I do a lot of canning. So they have a bunch of what they call bread in a jar recipes. And I used to make a lot of that with fruit that I got inexpensively. And then my kids would have that for snacks. In fact, the neighbor kids like to come to my house, and they'd go down to our cellar and decide which kind they wanted. They'd have that for their sort of snack treat. But the KitchenAid is handy for that because it's big. You can do a really big batch at the same time. So it's
now, how did you do the breads? Did you actually bake it, or did you just put in all the ingredients?
Yeah, I use either wide mouth pint jars or the wide mouth pint and a half jars. And I found it's easiest if you cut a little circle of wax paper, or you could use parchment paper if you had it, and put it at the bottom, and then you kind of grease inside the jar, but don't get it on the outside of the rim. And then you just put the bread batter in there, and you bake it in the oven. I put it on a cookie sheet. And when it was done, I checked to see if it was done by using a spaghetti stick, noodle. And then when it was done, you just take it out and you just wipe off the lid real good while it's hot, and then you just put on a canning jar lid and screw it down tight, and then I usually throw a towel or something over it. It sucks down, and it'll last for a year or two, actually. It lasts for a long time. It just sucks it in there. And then you have these free snacks. And like I said, my kids used to really like it, especially my son and their friends. Boys are always hungry, it seems. And so, made it really quick. But you could make using your big KitchenAid, or actually with my other mixer, because I can mix really big loads with it too. But the KitchenAid can hold a lot. You can make a bunch of these up, and then you have a dessert, whenever you want. You can make applesauce or banana or zucchini. I used to make zucchini bread in it. Yeah. So it's kind of a fun way to save your time. And if you were saving energy down the road, then if you fill up your oven with 1 or 2 cookie sheets with these things on it, and you just bake it for one time, then you've saved a lot of time of cooking later on when you only bake like a couple loaves of bread, and they take, 25, 30 minutes. I can't remember now. But instead you're doing maybe 15 or 20 of them at the same time, so you're saving time and energy, and then you can just pull it out, and it's just extremely handy. So I did a lot of that, especially when our kids were home. I still do a fair amount, but there's just my husband and I, so we're not cooking in the mass amount that I used to when I have 5 kids at home. But I'm always into saving energy and time, and that's like your food processor saves time, the mixer saves time, even the crock pot saves time, and you can create really nice meals, but you don't have to sit there and babysit them the whole time. You can just get them going. And so I feel like the more you do that, then the more enjoyable cooking can be. And there is something, I'm not big on buying a lot of bought stuff. And there's just something really neat, like having banana bread baking in your oven, or having any kind of food that you're baking in your oven, or the crock pot even puts out an aroma. And it's just it's just really nice. And you don't see that so much anymore. It kind of gives you the same feel when you go by a pizza place and smell a pizza, Well, you have it in your own home instead. And I feel like a lot of people are missing that joy. I would call it a joy myself. And it doesn't have to take a long time to make a lot of these foods. That's what's great. People, I don't have time. But I used to have a whole bunch of recipes that I could put together in 15, 20 minutes. We could be easily within a half hour, if not less. And, it saved us time, and it was nice. You didn't have to pay all that money for who knows what's in the fast food restaurants, what's in their food. Yeah. You don't know. So,
well,
anyway,
Sharon, I want to finish up.
Tangent.
I want to finish up. I got a couple comments on the KitchenAid when we come back, and then I want to go on to the blender. Welcome back, everybody. This is Cathy with USA Prepares with Sharon. We were talking about mixers and a KitchenAid. I had a couple comments. A lot of times we never read the manual, and one of the things that I was reminded of the last time we used ours, we make Polish coffee cakes 2 or 3 times a year, and we make a double batch because we give them as gifts. And when you have to do the coffee cakes, it literally fills up that bowl. Because we get about 6 loaves out of it, so it's pretty full. And you'll feel the mixer getting warm, and they recommend that you let it cool down at least a half hour so that you don't burn up the motor or wear out the brushes. So that's one thing to keep in mind. There are nice features that you can use with the KitchenAid. You can stir with it, and that's at the very lowest speed, the number 1. And it literally is like somebody standing there stirring real slow. And then it has a slow mixing, which you can still use that for mashing potatoes or when you want to cut into shortening and things like that. Then you have a mixing and a beating when you start to go up higher in speed. So then you can do that like creaming your sugars or shortening, or once you start increasing your cookie dough, if you need to, or your cake mix, you need to go a little faster, you can slowly increase it. Then they go all the way up to fast whipping, and they actually have a whipping that looks like a big whisk. And if you're going to make meringue, or you have to have an egg white beat real frothy, that does a nice job. I've never been able to get a meringue with egg whites well on a hand mixer. It just doesn't have enough power from what my experience was. So they have so many functions on it that you can do so many things with it. So there are different attachments. There's also a sausage stuffer attachment, which we do make Polish sausage, which is kielbasa. We make that. So we have that food grinder and a sausage stuffer, and they have a pasta maker. So those were just some of the things I wanted to mention, but probably one of my favorite things to make with it is mashed potatoes. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Sharon, but that's probably one I use the most.
I prefer homemade mashed potatoes. In fact, I don't like the powdered bought ones at all.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And you know what else they have? They also have, my friend bought one of these. We don't. We actually have a different one. But you can buy a meat grinder attachment to go on those things. And that's what they did because they already had the big KitchenAid. And they would actually use it to grind their deer meat. It doesn't go as fast as, like, we actually have a regular grinder that we bought. But it does work. I mean, we helped them process their first deer. They'd had deer before, but they never processed it themselves. And they purchased one of those, and she used it, and I suspect they're still using it. I don't know if they've ever upgraded to anything else. So it didn't go super fast, but it certainly did the job, and they did a lot of they have a large family of children, and so they did a lot of their meat into hamburger, and that's how they processed it. So that actually can be a great tool if you don't, if you think you're going to be processing any of your own meat and grinding it, even if you buy stuff in a store and grind it because you want, like if you buy pork and want to make your own sausage or whatever. So it's nice to have a meat grinder, but you can actually get that attachment and it won't cost you an arm or leg. The way we process all our meat and stuff, so we just bought a good grinder. We had a really old one that was wonderful, but it finally wore out. It must have been a 50s. I'm not kidding. Grinder. And we finally just bought a new one. But, mixers are just like super invaluable to me. They really are. And the KitchenAid is just an amazing mixer, and you have so many options, like you said, that if you were going to invest in one mixer and wanted to have a lot of options, I would 100% recommend a KitchenAid. I really would. Because, like you said, it'll whip it up and everything. Now, my favorite little old mixer, like I said, the Sunbeam thing, it is so powerful, it will make egg whites. But no, I don't think the hand mixers work very well on that at all. I just don't. I agree with you 100%. It's just so nice if you have the right tools. And you may not be able to get a KitchenAid right away, but I would really recommend checking things like Craigslist. And people have these little newspapers are called different things. Sometimes they're nickel savers or whatever. And you can check in those, and sometimes people just get rid of them, or we even saw one at a garage sale because people were moving and they didn't use it and they were going to get, you sell it. So you can kind of find them used once in a while, but they're not as easy to find. I agree.
No,
and it might benefit you just to save your money. A lot of times around Christmas time, they have great big sales, and just kind of watch it, and you probably can get a good deal, or just, Costco carries them. So I presume Sam's Club does. And, you might just probably, if you can come up with the money, you'd be better off just buying a new one, honestly.
Yeah.
And I'm into buying things not necessarily new if you don't have to, but that one would probably be a worse investment,
Yeah. Well, we're headed to the top of the hour. When we come back, we are going to talk about some of our other favorite things in the kitchen, and the blender is probably the next one. So we'll be right back. Welcome to USA Prepares. This is Cathy. I'm filling in for Vince Finelli, and I'm here with Sharon. We are talking about our appliances and our favorite things that we use in the kitchen and how we use them. I wanted to mention, Sharon, you had said things about buying at Christmas time. That's an excellent idea. A lot of times at Christmas time, they have these kinds of gifts for people: blenders, slow cookers, crock pots, KitchenAids, and I do see those go on sale at Christmas time, especially at Costco. I can't remember whether I've ever seen them at Sam's, but I know Costco carries KitchenAid, and they had a great sale. They had like $150 or $200 off, and it was a 5-quart, so it was a nice one. So you can save up your money if you can't find them, but you made a comment about where to find them, and I agree. Moving sales and estate sales are great ideas. Throughout the years, I've gone to moving sales where people have just gotten rid of things just because they can't take them. And this has nothing to do with kitchen, but one lady, she had this wrapping paper bin, and it was filled with wrapping paper and bags and tape. I mean, there was probably $100 worth of wrapping paper in there, and she sold it for $2 to me. I just can't take it. Just here. And so I'm still using the wrapping paper for there. But I got a couple summers ago, I went to an estate sale, and I know if you can go in an area where you know, like maybe there were older people, or in the more rural, I find more things in the farm country part than I do in the city. But I found Revereware from the 70s that was perfect with all the lids. I got a whole set. I think there were 6 pans. I got a set for $12. And
wow.
It was everything. You know, it was the big stock pot and the quart, the like the 2 quart, the 1.5 quart. So I don't need it right now, but I have given them away to people that had, boy, I wish I could find a Revereware set, because those are the heavy duty ones. You can tell that they're made better. So I wanted to talk about blenders, but before I do that, I just wanted to mention real quick, and I'm going to kind of just read my list of things I use all the time in the kitchen, because I know we won't get through the whole thing. And that way, people want to get an idea of maybe what they can look for, especially now the spring is coming, and if you're going to be shopping or doing garage sales or an estate sale, so you could look. So we talked about the food processor. My food saver, I use that all the time. One example with my food saver was I had made chicken salad and I made too much. And so I have these little canisters, and I put the chicken salad in there, and I vacuum sealed all the air out. And about 4 or 5 days later, I used that for lunch. So I didn't have to throw it away, because you get tired of it every day. My third thing was my cast iron skillet, and I do have my mom and dad, which is the old Griswold one. A griddle. I use a griddle on a stove. It's like covers 2 burners. So if you're going to make pancakes or bacon or something like that, it's a nice long piece of a pan. I have a convection oven, a toaster oven. I use my KitchenAid, which I already mentioned. I use my bread maker quite a bit. Slow cooker, my blender. Obviously, most people have a coffee pot. I have a wooden cutting board that I found at a garage sale probably 20 years ago, and it's beautiful. It's variegated. It's got light and dark wood, like striped almost, but it's 24 inches long and it's 12 inches wide. And it is so useful for so many things. I chop there. I can put hot pans on there. The only thing I don't use it for is meat. I don't put any meat. I don't cut meat on there. I use a plastic one or a hard composite one. My stock pots, which we talked about, with a colander in. If you have one that's got the colander that fits inside, that's handy too. Cookie sheets, my dehydrator, an electric knife, and a hot air, like a popcorn popper. So those were just some of them when I was thinking about the show. And before we get talking about blenders, I just wanted to mention that probably now would be a good idea to talk with our families, how we can all work together, what are our strengths and weaknesses. Maybe we pick a day where we teach the family how to can tomatoes, or how to make homemade applesauce, or how to save money in the kitchen, because, I listened to Vince yesterday talk to Gwyneth about home ec classes. And quite honestly, I took home ec in high school, but I really don't feel that I learned nearly as much as I should have. I learned more from doing, and I didn't have the opportunity to learn from my mother because she had passed away. So if you have the opportunity to learn from someone, if you have a mother, an aunt, a sister, a friend who's a great cook, just go over and work with them. I think you'll learn so much more if you just can work with somebody.
I agree. That's really great. And I think a lot of older women would be happy to work alongside anybody that doesn't know how to do much cooking. I'm serious. I've invited, I had a girl come over last summer and we made salsa, you know. I've gone and helped some other people in the past, and I enjoy doing it because it's fun to share what you already know. You know, I have a similar list. I don't have a convection oven. I've never used one, so I don't know anything about it. But I do have I actually have 2 wood cutting boards, and they are actually better for your knives. And something I would recommend is getting some decent knives and a way to sharpen them. Now, my husband does all my knife sharpening. But if you ever have to work with dull knives, it's a lot harder, and it's so much easier if you have sharp knives. So I find that a fairly high priority. Although I admit sometimes mine start to get dull, and I just haven't given them to him. He'll do it whenever I give them to him. But I just have to remember to do that. You were mentioning quite a few things. I think you need some baking pans. So many people don't have them. Some 9x9 and then a 9x13 pans are just really all the time, and you can find them. I know not everybody wants to go garage selling, but a lot of times garage sales are on Saturday, and you can get all kinds of baking pans for 50 cents, $1 or something. And if not, there's stores like we have a Ross's store, and you can buy baked goods, baking pans and stuff. They're very inexpensive, and they're brand new. But you do need that in order to cook a lot of your foods. And I have cookie sheets, and I think they're called air bake. I was going to look it up. They're kind of a double layer cookie sheet and have a little ridge around the edge of them. And they're super handy because you can put all kinds of stuff in it. It doesn't roll off onto your oven. But also because it has an air bake, it's the air between the top layer and the lower layer. You can't hardly burn cookies. They'll get super dark brown, but they don't get black. And so I love those things. They're not inexpensive, but I got them for like Christmas or something like that. I asked for it. So any cookie sheet will work better than no cookie sheet, but it is nice if you have the option to get ones that make your life easier. And I put a lot of things that I want to keep hot in the oven. We still fry foods. So if I make like chicken strips, I put them on this cookie sheet in the oven to keep warm. And then the grease doesn't, while I'm frying batches, the grease doesn't roll off because it has that little lip around the edge of it. I don't know, maybe it's more than 1/4 inch. I don't know how big it is. Actually, I haven't measured it. But they're really handy to have that. And then one of my other favorite things, because I don't like my counter to get all messy, I don't know if I mentioned this in the past, I have a great big pizza pan. I mean, I don't know how big it is, maybe 18 inches across or something pretty big. And it's circle, and it kind of just flutes up on the edge. And I roll out my pie crust there. I roll out my biscuits or anything I'm making cookie dough that like sugar cookies. And that way all that mess stays on that pan, and all I have to do is take it over to the sink and dump out the extra flours and stuff like that. So to me, that made me start making more things by hand because I didn't have the whole countertop to clean off. And when I bake, I just don't bake very tidy. I'm afraid if I'm rolling pie, it just, flour starts flying all over, and then I'm having to move canisters to clean behind it. So by putting it in this round pan, it definitely crawls almost all the flour, and then I just have one pan that, like I said, I just dump it in the sink. So that's just kind of one of my little time saver, mess saver things that I do. I think pretty much everything you have, those stuff that I would use. The other thing we talked on another class, but if you can get a dehydrator, they're really handy. You were going to talk about the blenders, and what I used to do a lot with blenders is make puree for fruit rolls. And then, of course, just smoothies, or even when I made jam, like I make huckleberry jam, and I prefer it not to be real lumpy. I used to put it in my blender to blend it up and then, cook it down. Something we hadn't talked about before, though, Cathy, is I just picked up those little immersion mixers, little blenders, immersion blenders. And I was watching some cooking shows, and I never thought I needed one, but I find it's really handy when you're making soup if you just want to puree a little bit instead of taking some out and put it into your blender, which is what I used to do. So it's kind of a handy gadget that I've just been learning to play with, and I'm making this apple butter, so I can just take it when it all gets kind of soft. I just take that in there and puree it all up, and then I just let it cook down in my crock pot. So it's been worth my money. I paid under $20 for one, so they're not exorbitant. I don't know if you've played around with them at all, but I've actually...
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I do use it for, like you said, for breaking up, like if you want a soup, but you don't want it, all the chunks in there. Yeah. You just can't lift it up too high or you'll get it all over.
No, I'm learning about the splash factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went online to see if there was a way to avoid that, and I guess that's a common problem. You just have to be careful. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the other thing
helpful. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, they are. And the biggest thing is you just have to, like, if you can do it, like, where it's not real hot. Like, they tell you sometimes let it cool down. And that could be because of the splash factor, but it could also be that, I don't know, the base of it, most of them have metal blades, but they're like a hard plastic. So I don't know if they can tolerate the real high heat or not.
I put mine in a really hot pot because I was making kind of a cream soup with you want some texture, but you want it kind of creamy, so you do the bottom, I just did it in my kettle, so it worked. And I've been doing it with my apple butter in the crock pot, and it's quite high because I'm cooking it on high. So I think they can handle it. You just do have to be careful splashing. They had some ideas, but they didn't sound very practical to me. So the idea is just be careful, and if you're going to lift it up, don't lift it up towards you. You figure it out when you start using it. I'm just saying. But we were talking about, if you want to jump over to your cast iron pans, because I love cast iron pans.
Sure. We can talk about the music is coming, but we'll talk about the cast iron pans, and then also I have a couple comments on the blender, but when we get back, we'll talk about our cast iron pans. So we'll be right back. So welcome back. I'm here with Sharon. Sharon, you wanted to talk about cast iron pans?
Well, I jump around. I was thinking maybe you want to finish up on the blender. I forgot that you hadn't got a chance to share your part. It's just so easy. We can jump all over when we start talking kitchen stuff, but it'd probably be smart for everybody just if you finish up on the blender before you jump around again.
Oh, sure. Well, I do have a Vitamix, which is an inexpensive blender, and I would never spend the money, but my husband actually found one for me last year, and it was a Black Friday sale or something like that, and he found a great deal on one, and he bought me one because I use my blender probably daily. I make a lot of green smoothies, and I use it for salad dressings and pureeing, but I'm just going to read some of the things that you can use a blender for. Now, I know the Vitamix has a real strong motor, and most people that have one have it for life. So if it's something you're going to do every day, that might be another thing you could save up the money like you would for a KitchenAid. It's something that once you have it, you just go like, wow, this is amazing. But here are some of the things that you can do. And with a more inexpensive blender, you may not be able to do it, so you'd have to check. But one thing with the blender, I would say, is put your ingredients in the right order. Because I had someone have a blender and got rid of it because they said, oh, it just won't blend, and they put all the dry ingredients in the bottom. But if you're going to make something with liquid, that you put the liquid in first, then you put like the dry powders or grains or whatever you're using. Then you put, like, let's say you're making a smoothie, then you'd put your leafy greens in there or your fruits and veggies next, and then your ice on the top. Because if you don't have enough liquid, it'll just stir and stir and stir, and it won't really blend. So, you might have to turn it off and open it up and add a little more water or juice or whatever you're using. But here's some things that it can do. It can make smoothies. It can juice. It can puree. It can dry chop or wet chop. And you could, like I said, you can use it as an emulsifier, like for salad dressings. You can make applesauce in it, and pesto, hummus, guacamole, salsa. What I used mine for was sometimes you buy those natural peanut butters, and they got the oil on the top, and they're like really hard on the bottom. Well, I dug mine out, and I put it in there, and then I poured the oil in there with it, and just very slowly started letting it mix. And then I did have to add like a little more peanut oil to it because it was so hard that I could barely stir it. So that took all the work out of it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to use it. And you can even make, like, in the Vitamix, you can make like rice milk, and they have soups that you can make. And I haven't done it yet, but I was looking at the book when I first got it, and you can grind flour. So there's a lot of uses to it, but that's only if you're going to use it for those items. If you're just going to use it for like making salad dressings or smoothies, you don't need that high quality of one. So I don't know if you use yours for anything else, Sharon, but that was just some of the nice features that I've noticed with mine.
Well, an older lady in our church just gave me one last fall. They are amazing. It's an old Vitamix, but it is so powerful. But I haven't had it that long. I was using it. We were really into having smoothies for quite a while, and then I kind of backed off. I plan to get back into doing it again in the morning. But I did use my regular blender, and I made some really good homemade mayonnaise. I usually buy it, but I just wanted to learn how to do it. And it really isn't that complicated, and it worked out really nice. And at the time, I was trying to eliminate some extra chemicals in my diet and stuff, so I made my own with our own eggs and stuff. But you can actually make mayonnaise with it, which is nice if you couldn't get to the store and you have, different foods that you like to have mayonnaise with. You can make your own. You really can. It wasn't even hard. You just So, yeah, they have so many options. Like I said in the past, I use them a lot to make fruit puree and make fruit rolls for my kids. That's another thing the neighbor kids used to like. In fact, it's kind of funny because I'm older now. And these kids come up and say, I remember those fruit rolls we used to eat at your house. So if you do get a dehydrator, you can make fruit rolls, and it's a good way to use up seasonal fruit or whatever grows. I used to get a lot of free fruit. I used to find people that had peaches pears and apples and plums, and people just have the fruit dropping from the trees.
Welcome back. This is Cathy with Sharon. We're filling in for Vince. Sharon, I wanted to make one comment before we went on to the cast iron cookware. I was reading about the blender, and some of the things in the blender you can also do in the food processor, like your pesto and your hummus and your salsa and your guacamole. Those two kind of overlap. So just to give you some information in case somebody doesn't have both, you can use it for both items. And one of the things I forgot to mention, and I haven't made yet, but I'd like to, is it does make the blenders do make like a sorbet, or you can make like milkshakes in them. So one of the reasons, and I think Sharon kind of feels the same way I do, is that there's so many things that you can make, but you can make them healthier. And you don't have all the preservatives, and you don't have the soybean oil, and you can just adjust the ingredients to what you like too. So I wanted to bring that up. And so, Sharon, if you want to talk about your cast iron cookware.
Well, we were talking about, there's two old-time cast iron cookware skillets. There's Griswold and there's Wagner, and they don't make them anymore, but you can find them, like estate sales, garage sales, that type of thing. That's how we've gotten ours. And they just last forever. My dad actually has a Griswold skillet, and he's 89, almost 90 years old. And my mom and dad got that when they first got married, so it must be 70 years old. And it still's good. It's thinner, but it still works great. So they're really a long-term investment. I also like it because, like I said, we used to be off-grid, so you can actually put them on a wood stove, or you could even use them over an open flame, and they keep the heat. You can actually, if you have a Dutch oven, this is jumping off a little, but if you were to heat up food in a Dutch oven and get it nice and warm like a stew, and it's not cooked, just raw veg, stuff, you can put it in a box and cover it really well like blankets, and it will keep cooking like a slow cooker. And you don't have, so you could save energy if you needed to do that, just a side note. But no, I have, we just collect a lot of these cast iron pans, the old ones. They all have the name brand. The only thing that I know that's available now normally is it's called Lodge something. And they're okay, but I have heard from people that have examined that, because I don't have them, that they have a coarser grain to them. And so the older Wagner and Griswold have a very fine grain that allow you to get that nice little sheen on it, so that it's almost a no-stick pan, which is really useful if you have old ones that are like that. And so I use mine a lot. I also have a cast iron griddle that goes across two burners, kind of like what you said, a griddle, but mine's cast iron. I don't remember what brand it is right now. I haven't used it recently. I used it when we had our kids at home. You make a big batch of pancakes or French toast, and you could do them all at one time, And so it was really handy for that. But I know you use yours. I just use mine for just frying anything, really, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you can even bake in them. You can bake in them. You can make like kind of a baked casserole, or you can make, I've made one time a cornbread in it, you know, just put it in a whole big skillet and cook it and bake it. So what are some of the things that you like to make? I've just used it over the years. It's hard to even think of all the ways I've used it, but I probably use mine every other day, making something.
Well, I have a Griswold, and it was my mom and dad's. It was the same thing. It's got to be 70 years old, and I inherited it. And what I do is, when I use it, it always has that little bit of a oil film on it, which you want. Mm-hmm. You don't want to ever take like a scouring pad and, you know, strip all that off. So when I'm frying, let's say I want to fry potatoes, I'll put a little bit of butter or oil in it, and I fry them, and then when I'm done, I turn the burner off, and I'll add a little hot water to it and let maybe just like a quarter inch or so, just so that the stuff doesn't dry on there. And then I'll take like a rubber spatula, like a hard one, and I kind of stir it to get all the crumbs off or anything that was like maybe stuck on there. Then I turn it over and wipe it out with a paper towel and dry it. And then I'll take a little bit of olive oil and I just rub it around. I let it set and completely cool. And then I have a special spot in my cupboard where I just never, I can't say I never have, but most of the time I don't scrape it or anything like that. As long as it's hot and you put some warm water in there, most everything will just come right off. And there is a way to season it. Now, I haven't done it for years, so I don't want to say the wrong way. I don't know if you season yours, but I do know you're not supposed to scrape them with soap and water and all that. And I know there's a way with salt. Some people use salt with some oil if you've got stuff that's like burnt on, and that won't take that finish off. But I use mine for frying too. And you mentioned baking bread in there. And I'm actually looking to find a cast iron lid because my neighbor makes a bread. It's kind of called like an artisan bread, and it's online. And if you look, it was on YouTube. It was under New York Times. It's called a 2006 bread recipe. I can't remember the man's name, but it's very easy. It's a 3-minute video. And he just uses like the yeast and the water and the bread, and he mixes it with his hands and with a spoon, and you put it in the cast iron skillet. But you have to have a lid that you can't have like a Bakelite finish or handle on it. So I'm looking for a cast iron lid because it comes out beautifully, and I want to make it, but you have to have it in a 500-degree oven. Wow. It's a real nice, he bakes it for us and shares it with us so we know it's good. So if you want to look that up online, I'm just looking around to see. I'm sure if I go to like a camping place or something, I can find one. I just don't want to pay full price for it right now. But, cast iron, it's just durable, and you're not getting any of the Teflon out of it, in your system. And so as long as you season them and you take care of them, they last a long time.
Yeah, they make little ones, too. Like if you just want to fry up a couple eggs or scramble some eggs, they have little cast iron ones. But if you were using Teflon, which some people feel the need, like my mother-in-law has a lot of arthritis, and lifting anything heavy is really difficult for her. So she has one of those lighter Teflon pans. I picked it up for her. But you want to make sure that it isn't dented or chipped or anything. You want it to be really smooth because you do not want to be eating Teflon. You know what I mean? So, it's not terrible to have one, but if you can get to a cast iron, it's good. Like I got a cute little cast iron one that isn't that heavy, but, she's older and she's just used to what she does. So hers was getting icky, so I found another one that was like new at a garage sale for her. And, that's how she likes to make her eggs. So you can use Teflon, and it's workable, but if you can get used to using cast iron, I really feel they're superior. And they cook a lot more evenly because that whole cast iron gets warm. And so I think you end up with a better product, but, basically you do need a skillet, okay? Whatever kind of skillet you get, you need a skillet if you want to do very much home cooking. And kind of like you said, if you can't get one thing, get the other until you can upgrade and keep your ears and eyes open. And the other idea is if you know a bunch of older people that are moving into these retirement homes, a lot of them would be happy to almost give you stuff because they can't take it all with them. They have to majorly downsize. Yeah. So kind of take just look around and make yourself known. And, you'd just be surprised. I was given a whole ton of canning jars because people know I can. And she decided she wasn't going to can anymore. I personally think it's foolish for her to get rid of them, but if she wants to give them to me, I'll take them, And there's a lot of people that just for whatever reason don't want to use this stuff anymore. And it's in great shape, and especially some of the older ones that are even better than the new ones. That I'm always into looking for the best deal. We don't buy a whole lot of things new. Now, I did buy the KitchenAid new. And there are a couple things I do buy new, but by and large, I have more patience than money. And I just look around. We have some thrift stores, and our one thrift store has a half off sale one day a week. And so we went in, I bought one of those great big old crock pots because I make meals for different things that you give to people like homeless type stuff. And it's one of those great big, huge oval ones, and I paid like $7 for it because it was on a half off day. And they're way more than that brand new. So a lot of times, if you're just willing to do a little bit of looking around, you can save a ton of money. But I know you've done some good deals too, like with our shoppings and stuff.
Oh yeah, if you kind of have a list in your head, or you make a list, and you just poke around when you're out, or you like you said, you let people know if you know people that are moving, or if you see a moving sale, and you'd be surprised. Like I was at one a couple years ago, and this woman had so much in her basement. She was an older woman, but she was the one that I got the Revereware from, and she had these plastic containers, the square ones that fit in your freezer, the freezer ones. They are so much thicker than the ones you can buy now. The lady sold me, there must have been 40 of them. She sold them, the whole set for me for $1. And wow, they are so much nicer than the ones I have now. And so it's just a matter of looking, and I had a friend do the same thing with the canning jars. We were talking, and she said, I'm not canning anymore. Do you want them? And I told her no. And then I thought about it, and the next day I called her back. I said, yeah, I'll take them. So she brought them to me. She goes, oh, there's all kinds of stuff, different stuff in there. And she brought me some of the canning tools that were in there. I got like the little jelly jars. I probably got 4 dozen of them, the small ones, because I make raspberry freezer jam with those. And then this way, if I give them away, I didn't pay anything for them. But you can use, like, if you buy jam or someone gives you a jar that, like, you can't can with, then you can use those instead and give those away and save your canning ones for if you need to do a hot bath canning. And she gave me lids. I had like 8 boxes of lids in there. And she said, oh, I didn't even realize those were in there. So, yeah, if you just have to, you can't buy it all at once. So I think a lot of people, when they're downsizing or they're moving, I think that's probably good advice. People that are just can't take it with them, or the older stuff is better. I prefer the older appliances. And one of the things about the crock pots that you were talking about, Sharon, is I read that the older style, the one that was more like the upright one that had the crock inside, it's more vertical than horizontal. I read that those are supposed to be a lot better, and the crock, you can adjust the temperature better than, like mine, the one I have right now is just low, medium, and high. But those there's a dial, and a lot of people like those better because sometimes even the low boils too hard if you just want it to keep warm or simmer. So if you can find those, and which I do, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I have 4 crock pots. I just bought 2 as a backup because I found them. I found real nice ones at a garage sale, So
yeah, I have 5, I think.
Yeah, and then if you take it somewhere and you don't get it back right away, then you can just get it later. When we come back, we can maybe talk about our slow cooker for a minute and what we use our slow cookers for. Welcome back, everybody. This is Cathy, and I'm here with Sharon, and we're going to talk about the slow cooker. So, Sharon, go ahead, and I'll let you talk about what you use it for and how you use it first. Well, I don't know if Sharon's there, so I will go ahead and talk about what I use it for. I use it for things like sloppy joes. You obviously brown the meat first, and then you can add all your ingredients, and you can keep things warm. The nice thing about them are you can put items in there. You can use your tried and true recipes, and you can you don't have to worry about it. As long as you have enough liquid in there for whatever you're cooking, you can let it cook all day. Some of the things that you should do is you should sear your meat if they tell you to do it before you put it in there, because it will caramelize the meat and it will give it more texture and flavor. It does take longer to cook, so don't keep lifting your lid up. And you can use a cheaper cut of meat, and I think Sharon may have mentioned that before. In some recipes, too, you have to grease your slow cooker. If you're going to do something with pasta, everything will stick to it. So if you have something where maybe cheese or pasta, you can go ahead and just grease that. One of the tricks that I learned, so especially in the summer when you don't want to heat up your kitchen, is you can take whole potatoes or sweet potatoes, and you could just turn your crock pot on, and I take a fork and I just make them, I make indentations with the fork, and then I put them in there and I just kind of check them, and that way you don't have to heat up your whole kitchen. So I do that with those. And also,
do you add any liquid to that? Do you add any liquid to it, or just let it dry roast inside?
No, I don't. I just let it cook. So you just have to watch it so you don't overcook them. If you overcook them, well, you can still use them for something, but you can fry them up for hash browns or something. But one of the women I listened to online, she came up with that trick. So anyway, do you have any suggestions for the slow cooker, Sharon?
Just kind of like you could cook it all day long and the meat gets really tender. I just take like chicken and make maybe like a barbecue and just cook it down that way. Or we use a lot of venison, so you can season it and just let it cook in there. We even used, Vincent had his Italian roast, and I used it with venison. It was wonderful. He had a whole list of things. But yeah, it's just your friend. And like in the summer, like you said, you don't have to heat up your whole house. That's why I'm real interested in the baked potatoes. I hadn't done that, so I'll have to try that. No, they're amazingly useful, very useful. Yeah.
Well, I got a crock pot recipe book, and I think it was a Christmas present. It was probably from Sam's or somewhere like that, and it's older, but it's got so many tips in there and so many recipes that I haven't even begun to do. Some of the things, I know some people have baked bread in there. I haven't done it, but I mean, you can do things like, if you want to do like pulled pork, or I cook my beans in there. I soak them overnight, and then I rinse them, and then I put water in, and I'll chop up an onion, just quarter it, throw it in with some salt and pepper, and I cook my beans, and I just watch them. If I'm going to be home, I mean, if I'm going to be gone for a few hours, it doesn't matter, but you don't want to be gone for like 8 hours because you'll have mush. So if you're going to be home, you can just kind of check them, use a slotted spoon and sort of check them when they start to fall apart. You know they're done. But you can save so much money by just cooking your own beans, and they're so much more tasty. But there's recipes in there that you can make like it's kind of like the egg bake and the French toast. You put the things in and, put them in overnight. And soups and stews, anything that there's just hundreds of recipes. I have a bean dip that I make. and I just put it in there, and, you know, you can leave it on warm then when people come over. So, you know, slow cookers they're so much of a time saver, especially there's so many working women, or even on a day where you know you've got appointments or you're working in the yard, or you've got to pick up somebody at the end of the day, and you're just not going to be home for dinner. So,
good.
But Sharon, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I hope we helped some people. And one last thought was this morning I saw my bluebirds checking out the houses and the feeders, so spring must be here.
Oh,
so
nice.
Thank you, Sharon, for joining us.